Hi everyone, welcome to our Membership Voice webinar. My name's Kero O'Shea and I'm the Membership Director for Rotary District 9465. Tonight's webinar is the much anticipated Engaging Millennials webinar, which will be presented by Australian Rotaract Chair Rebecca Fry. Beck, who's been involved in RILA, Rotaract and Rotary spanning 13 years. So Beck has presented to audiences from 5 to 500 plus people and in 2017 was recognised as one of Rotary's Youth All-Stars. Beck's mission is to inspire and empower more people to take action using Rotary as a vehicle to create positive change. As a millennial, Beck will share millennial trends and solutions for engagement with you tonight. So it's now my very great pleasure to introduce Australian Rotaract Chair Beck Fry. Over to you, please, Beck.
Thank you so much, Kero. I really appreciate the warm introduction and hello to everyone on the line. So today I will be talking about engaging millennials. And even though I am the chair of Rotaract in Australia, we'll only briefly touch on Rotaract. We'll really be focusing on millennial engagement in Rotary specifically. So to just touch a little bit on who I am and my life journey, particularly through Rotary, just given its relevance as I'm currently an engaged millennial. I started in Rotary in 2006 when I was selected to attend the National Youth Science Forum. I was then selected to attend the international program in South Africa, which was a phenomenal opportunity. And since then, I've been heavily involved in Rotaract and RILA, as Kero touched on. And my involvement in Rotary has really shaped my career path. So I shifted from a science technical based trajectory to working in corporate social responsibility and community impact. And more recently, I've recently joined Rotary, the E-Club of Silicon Valley, which is a really exciting opportunity. And I'm looking forward to heading to Toronto in a few weeks, where I'll get the opportunity to present on the main stage as well. So it's been a massive journey. And really what I really want to talk about is how we can engage more young people to have, a similar experience, but also remain engaged in Rotary, given the amount of investment that Rotary is putting into youth. So just in terms of what today will look like, firstly, we'll touch on who actually is a millennial. We'll then delve into the data. So what a millennial needs and wants, and what are their challenges to staying engaged in Rotary. Then we'll dive into some of the solutions and the practical applications for Rotary, while finishing with feedback and questions as there's time. So who are millennials? Millennials are the generation that's born between 1980 and the year 2000. They are also referred to as Generation Y. And one of the reasons that they are so important, or are classed as so important, is because millennials are the largest generation yet. And that's on a global level. So when we look at the increasing birth rates in countries like China and India. And if you take that forward, not just from a Rotary perspective, but from a business perspective, these people aren't just the future leaders of the organisation, they're actually your target market. So from a commercial perspective, these are the target group of people that companies are going to be needing to align their product towards. So that kind of highlights the importance of millennials. Now, millennials grew up alongside technology, and a lot of that is in the social network space. So be it Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. And as a result, there's this perception of whether millennials are more or less connected, or the skills that they have as a result of the engagement in those social networks. But I think the key is really understanding that social networks can actually be used positively. It's not all bad news, and they're here to stay. So we really need to be able to leverage them in the Rotary world to get the most out of them. Now, if you look at the sorts of characteristics that a millennial has, so yes, they are confident, they have high expectations, and they're achievement oriented. And I think sometimes people can view millennials then as having a sense of entitlement. And I think that, as with any characteristics, if they are taken too far, they can be seen in a negative light. But I think the great thing is that if you do have a cohort of people that are confident and achievement oriented, if you can channel that energy effectively, there's actually a lot of potential there. And I guess that's where the really nice element comes into with Rotary, because millennials also aspire to make a difference in their work. And that's where we've kind of got this beautiful match made in heaven, where millennials are wanting to change the world but don't necessarily know how, while Rotary has an incredible framework, and yet only 5% of Rotarians are under 40, which is quite a staggering statistic. So if we start to move into what millennial needs and wants are, this is some data that was collated on a survey that we ran a few months ago. And as you can see, there was an overwhelming response that the primary reason that millennials engage in Rotaract and Rotary is due to community service, being first with 53% of the vote. And the second element was the social component. Noting here that respondents were only able to choose one answer, so they really had to pick which was the most important element for them. We will dive into some of this data later and what it means. So I'm going to move on now to what the barriers to entry and engagement are. And there were two major things that came out running from the front. So we had money at 47% of the response, time at 35%, and then lack of social connection scheduling were followed by that, and then no one had an issue with location. So then we start to look at, well, what does this data actually mean? So if we go back to the millennial needs and wants, yes, people are looking for local community service and they're looking for social elements. But in saying that, they are two components that people can actually get if they're from if they're involved in any charity. So if they went to the New South Wales Cancer Council, for example, or any cancer council in Australia, and wanted to participate in Relay for Life or the organising of that, they would get local community volunteering and a social element. So I think the really fascinating thing is that the data can be misleading. While people are overwhelmingly looking for community volunteering and social, it's actually the bottom three elements that can set Rotary apart. Now, those bottom three elements were professional development, international projects, and opportunity to travel. So while Rotary has community service in spades, it's actually these bottom elements where Rotary can make a difference in engaging millennials. Now, if we move on to the barriers to entry and engagement, the really cool part about this is that yes, money is an issue, and yes, time can be seen as an issue, but really there's only two primary challenges that millennials have. And if we can address these challenges for them, then essentially the issue is solved, and they are solvable. So it means that we can spend most of our focus on two primary elements to get a strong return on investment in that sense. So I want to now explore the challenges just in a little bit more detail to set the scene for when we explore solutions. So first of all, starting with money. So I want to break down what the actual economic data looks like so that we understand what the financial challenges can actually be. So if we look at this table, and again, this is a generalization, so the financials will need to be slightly adapted based on individual clubs, but again, it's the overall perspective that's important here. So if we look at the membership fee, we can say that the membership fee is around $400. It might be slightly higher or lower. I've picked $420 just based on a couple of clubs that I've been talking to. Then if we start to look at the cost of meetings and perhaps fine sessions each week across 48 weeks once you take time off for whether it's Christmas and Easter, you're then already looking to just under $1,900. If we then start to look at events, conservatively being $40 per quarter, so I would appreciate that there might be, fundraising galas or, more expensive events in there. But if we maintain a conservative element, that's another $160 per year, which has brought the total now to over $2,000. If you then start to add in the cost of a district conference, where registration is $100 or more, you then may have a dinner component. And if it's out of the district, or if you have a wide district, you've got accommodation costs as well. We're then starting to look at $2,400+ per year. And then once you start to look at incorporating some of the national and international events, be it the recent Peace Conference that was held in Sydney, or the national conference that's coming up in Hobart, or even the international convention, you're looking at a commitment of more than $3,000 per year. So this is just to, again, set the scene, because we need to be looking at sustainable solutions for these problems. Now, when we go to time, so time was the other challenge that people raised. From my personal perspective, time is not really the primary issue here, because people will make time for what they see value in. So really what we then need to do is make people have Rotary as a priority. So then if we start to delve a little bit further into, time and money and the solutions, I would like to touch on what Henry Ford said. So he said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And so the reason that I flagged this is because it's not that people are looking for events to be cheaper or for there to be a less of a commitment. It's actually looking at the fact that people are looking for flexibility. It's flexibility on how they spend their time and money and choice, rather than just reducing those elements in general. So it's then looking at, well, rather than having our business or our Rotary selves and then our personal lives, be it family or travel, it's how do we actually manage essentially our needs in and amongst what we're doing. How do I choose to go to events that I'm interested in? How do I choose where I spend my money? And then I guess that comes to my second point, which is really that what we're really looking for here is values and value alignment. So values being career, health, family, friends, spirituality, money, and understanding where Rotary fits in terms of your values. And then value alignment from the perspective of, well, how much does or how much is this event worth in regards to my time and money? So if an individual event comes up, that's the opportunity to decide, well, yes, is it worth me spending my time and money on this individual event? Now, often we talk about work-life balance, and in Rotaract, we joke about work-life Rotaract balance. But really, we're not really talking about balance these days, because a lot of people don't work 9 to 5. A lot of people are now connected 24/7, whether it's checking work emails or being able to do some of their personal life within work time as well. And so rather than looking for work-life Rotaract or Rotary balance, we're actually looking for integration. So work-life Rotaract integration. So that's where our Rotary goals and our personal goals are in alignment, and potentially work as well, where all the different elements are actually feeding each other, so that rather than being these kind of separate siloed elements of life. So that's where Rotary is actually enhancing other elements of your life as well. So now the fun part. This is where we start to come in to look at the solutions. And the way that these solutions are structured is part of a solutions framework. So the first step of this framework is looking at connecting. So how do we actually understand the millennial market that we're working with? The second element to consider when we're looking at solutions is collaborating, and specifically thinking big picture in that space as well. The third element is the power of and that's where we start to look at market segmentation and developing a multitude of events for people to get involved in, rather than saying that a particular club has to act in a certain way, or that one way is better than another. It's looking at, well, how do we add to what we're doing, rather than it being an or situation. So I will delve into this further with more specific examples as well. And then the fourth element is really looking at review. So how do we actually ensure that we have ongoing evaluation that helps us to understand where we're at and where we continue to go? So now it's time for the practical applications and how we look at applying those the solutions framework and the challenges that we've got into the Rotary framework. So if we start to look at the first element, which was around connecting. So a good place to start is connecting with your local Rotaract clubs. So these are the 3 Rotaract clubs that are currently active in 9685, which is Northern Sydney, but we do have a wide range of Rotaract clubs right across Australia. And we see inconsistency in the relationships between Rotaract clubs and their sponsoring Rotary clubs. We also see that sometimes our Rotaract clubs have really great relationships with clubs that aren't their sponsor clubs as well. The thing that's really exciting about Rotaract at the moment is not only the support that we've seen from incoming Rotary President Barry Racine and his desire to double Rotaract. It's also looking at the presidential citation for next year, which indicates that not only is it a single Rotary club that can sponsor a Rotaract club, you're actually recognised for if a Rotaract club has multiple sponsors. So that's a shift on last year, and I think a really good thing to show that existing Rotary clubs can support existing Rotaract clubs rather than a need to just constantly create clubs. It's kind of a balance there. Now, you might be thinking, well, what do we do if we don't have a local Rotaract club and we're not sure that we can start one at the moment? Well, I'm sure that most clubs are actually engaging with their youth programs. So be it the National Youth Science Forum, Youth Exchange, RYLA, the Model United Nations Assembly. And this is the element where Rotary is engaging and investing significantly in youth. But often, once a person has attended one of these programs, we're not necessarily helping them to identify what the next step on their Rotary journey actually is or could look like. So it's about now, a really great way to connect those dots is through having a youth night. So one of the great things that my sponsoring Rotary Club happened to do when I was finishing up my involvement in the National Youth Science Forum was that instead of me coming back and just presenting to a room full of Rotarians as part of their meeting, they actually held a youth night. So I presented on my experience with the National Youth Science Forum. Someone else presented on their experience with RYLA, and another guy had received a community service award for his involvement at high school, and so he presented on that as well. That provided the perfect segue for Rotary to then say to me, Beck, when you're ready, come and let us know and we will support you to attend RYLA. And so that's what I did. A couple of years later, I went back and I did attend RYLA. And that, I think, was really then the next kind of stepping stone for me to then get involved in Rotaract and for me to then get involved in Rotary. So it's really helping the youth connect those dots as well. Now, if we start to look at collaboration, I think one of the key things is jumping in the same room. So when we've got young groups of millennials, so be it, through youth programs or through Rotaract, actually getting together and identifying where your similarities lie, so focusing on what we've got in common, and then understanding how those strengths can actually actually be leveraged. So the example I'll use is with Rotaract. If you are a Rotary club that's sponsoring a Rotaract club, or even a Rotaract club that is obviously then sponsored by a Rotary club, can at the start of your year, you come together and say, for Rotaract to say, well, this is our strategy this year. Rotary can share what their strategy is, and we go, great, here's where the alignment is in our strategy. So that's what we're going to focus on. Because too often, I think we see us working in silos, working independently, and then kind of jumping in or tapping the other group on the shoulder at the last minute, trying to get people to attend the awesome trivia night that we've organised, or to volunteer at a local barbecue, or something like that. So bring yourselves together and actually look at how you can leverage what it is you're already working on. Now, the thing is, during that time, it's also important to remember we are on the same team. Again, we have a habit to work in silos where in some circumstances we're actually competing against each other for members. And I think it's great that we understand that, you know, there is a push for members. But at the same time, how can we actually work together so that everyone wins? And a great example of this that I saw was in the Rotary International Convention in Atlanta. And there was a team of Rotarians from 5 clubs in a particular district, and they specifically had a membership team. And so any new member that came into one of their Rotary clubs, they all got referred to this membership team, and the membership team actually then worked to place them in the club that suited that person the most. They encouraged them to try out other clubs as well. And then what they found is that the membership of all 5 of those clubs actually increased over that year. So it's a great demonstration that if we actually work together rather than in competition with each other, and remember that we're all on the same Rotary team, there's a lot that we can achieve. Now, coming back to the power of and I've said before that it was professional development, international projects, and the opportunity to travel. That was Rotary's unique element. Now, I think the really cool thing is that our clubs are often also doing things that are in this space. So it's not necessarily about a need to actually fully focus on starting new initiatives or starting from scratch. It's actually leveraging some of the great frameworks that we've already got. So, for example, some Rotaract and Rotary clubs have already been collaborating on professional development initiatives where the Rotary clubs are able to, or the Rotarians are able to provide their skills to some of the Rotaractors. And so this is a photo from an event that we held in Sydney. It was a mock interviews event. So the Rotarians, who were employers in their own right, basically provided the Rotaractors with a test environment to go through their resume and practice their interview techniques. And it was great because the Rotarians felt that sense of value that they were providing their knowledge and skills to the Rotaractors, while the Rotaractors got this advantage to develop their professional skills as well. Now, similarly, I know a few clubs across Australia do donations in kind, and it's a great opportunity for people to actually be involved in an international project at a local level. So donations in kind being where items such as whether it's wheelchairs or hospital beds or often schooling equipment is collected and then shipped off in shipping containers to areas of need. So donations in kind is a great one that we can leverage for millennials. And then similarly looking again at the international perspective with RAWCS, so Rotary Australia World Community Services, and looking at how we can, engage people with on-the-ground projects and existing projects as well. Then we've got opportunities to travel and the Rotary International Conventions that are held every year. So again, how do we engage people and provide them with the opportunities to attend conventions where they're surrounded by 25 to 30,000 other Rotarians? and get that energy, get that experience, so then they can bring that home as well, while also having the opportunity to travel. And similarly, looking at mentorship programs. So again, how do we actually leverage the skills and experience that we've got in Rotary to develop appropriate frameworks that can share those skills with the younger generation? Now, the element that we spoke about before and looking at flexibility is really where we start to look at, well, how do we provide choice in what we're doing at the moment? So if we come back to the money piece, when we look at a membership fee, can we actually provide a monthly direct debit? Now, that might not work in the current way that you collect fees, but from a messaging point of view, it's easier to stomach a $35 fee per month rather than a $420 fee at once, for example. So with these examples, it's not saying, well, this is what you have to do. It's just starting to think about how we develop sustainable solutions. And let's bear in mind, the money element is probably not just for millennials. It's probably an issue across all generations. So addressing some of the barriers around money is actually really critical. Now, similarly with meetings and fines, can we actually provide choices around whether a meal is consumed at a meeting or not? Our local Rotaract club has our meeting for an hour, and then we go for dinner and a drink after the meeting. And that means that people can choose how much they spend, whether they even want dinner, they might just grab a drink, and it gives them flexibility to spend what they want to spend rather than a flat fee every week. Now, similarly with events, ensuring that you've got a range of events that people can engage with in at a range of different prices. And then when you start to look at our conferences, can you actually look at whether it's sponsorship? So I know that the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley provides sponsorship of about $100 when their members actually attend external events like district conference or training, because they're actually trying to encourage people to get involved. So is club sponsorship an opportunity? And similarly, can we actually look at fundraising initiatives for some of the national and international events as well, so that people can actually get access to those events through engaging the community and reducing some of the costs to them? So that's where we start to look at the flexibility element. So how do we look at, whether there's an online element as well in terms of engaging people? If they miss a meeting, how do they stay engaged? One of the things that I've seen is coffee with a Rotarian. So literally using a webcam or FaceTime or Skype. One person has a coffee on one end, the other Rotarian has a coffee on the other end, and literally it's like, rather than just being in a cafe where you're catching up, you're still having the same coffee experience. You can still see each other, but it's an opportunity to actually be flexible around location and timing as well. One club's looking at doing that for members who have, maybe they're either sick or busy and can't stay involved, can't attend all their meetings. So yeah, what's that online element? And like I said, this is the and component. So rather than changing what you're already doing, if what you're doing is working for your club, then that's great. Keep doing what you're doing. But how do we then add other elements to the mix as well? So perhaps your a dinner meeting on every Monday night is working really well for you, but perhaps in addition to that, there's also a Friday breakfast coffee for millennials before they go to work, or perhaps there's a particular volunteering initiative that might be particularly interesting to millennials that maybe the other membership base may not be as engaged in. So that's the market segmentation piece. So it's understanding that when you go to like an all-you-can-eat buffet, you don't grab all of the food items on the menu. You actually, just pick the ones that you like. And that's kind of the environment that we're looking to try and create for Rotary as well. And then the last element, before we wrap up, is then looking at review. So ensuring that the initiatives that are being implemented are evaluated on an ongoing basis. I know that when I became president at my Rotaract club, I was so determined to develop the perfect meeting. And I did for all of 3 months. And then after the 3-month period, that new meeting format started to get stale as well. And so we had to look at how we were then going to change it up and make it dynamic. So there's a really important element around review there. Now, just a couple of resources that are beneficial. So recently at the Peace Conference, we started the Rotaract Rotary Collaboration Hub for Australia and New Zealand. So jump on that Facebook group and join and continue the dialogue on how to engage not just Rotaractors, but Millennials in general. And similarly, Rotary's just launched a engaging younger professionals toolkit site. There are great videos and strategies on engaging young professionals there as well. So I'd highly recommend checking out that site. That was a lot to cover, and I hope that I've answered a lot of questions already, but happy to throw back to Kero now for some feedback and additional questions and perhaps clarifying some of the concepts that I've run through today.
Wow, thank you, Beck. That really was a tremendous array of opportunities, but we do have some questions for you. And the first one is a bit personal. How did you become Australian Rotaract Chair?
That is a great question, because that's not a goal I actually set out to achieve. For me, it was a natural progression. So I started in Rotaract as the professional development director for my club. That's where my personal passion lies, and I guess a lot of that's come out through RILA. So in addition to attending RILA, I was involved in my local leadership team for RILA and then director. So that's, like I said, where my personal volunteering passion lies. So I became professional development director. I seemed to have a good year, and a few people asked if I would be applying for president. So I ran for president and was elected as president. Similarly, after that, I saw that there was an opportunity to create change on a bit of a broader level in the district. So I became the district Rotaract representative. And then after that opportunity, I was asked if I was interested in the Rotaract chair role. And I'll admit I initially said no. And that's because I'm really passionate about working with people on the ground, and I'm passionate about providing proactive support for people. And at the time, I felt that the culture of Rotaract Australia was actually a little bit passive, so that wasn't what I was looking for. Fortunately, the incoming chair actually indicated that they were looking to reshape the culture of Rotaract Australia as well. So I guess I became engaged through aligned visions, and it went from there. I applied and became the vice chair. It's a 3-year term, so you're vice chair, chair, and then immediate past chair. So yeah, I'm currently in my year as chairperson, soon to be handing the role over to Bianca Lobo and her incoming team as well, while continuing to provide them with active support.
Thank you, Beck. A different question this time, and it's perhaps reversing traditional expectations. Can you think of circumstances where a Rotaractor might make a good mentor for a Rotarian?
I think that is definitely an opportunity. And I think it really comes down to Rotarians and I guess all people understanding what the skills are that they need to develop and who it is that can provide them with those skills. So I guess a common example that's used is social media, but it's still an important one because, like I said before, social media is here to stay. So I can see a situation where, it's not that a Rotaractor is, now going to be a life coach or, an answer for everything for a Rotarian. It's looking at, what are the specific skills that a Rotaractor has that a Rotarian would like? and leveraging that. So I think that, social media might be one example. Millennial engagement is probably another example as well. It's just trying to understand from the demographic itself the strategies that could actually be implemented as well. And I think one thing that's actually important to add on that note is that Rotaractors are between the age of 18 and 30. And if we start to look at young Rotarians, we might be going up to 35, and 40 years of age. So there's quite an array of experience, both a variety and depth of experience that's in that age group as well. So we find that Rotaractors, particularly from their mid-20s and onwards, are professionals in whether they're lawyers or doctors or HR professionals, or in my case, I'm a professional in corporate social responsibility. And I think there are a lot of professional skills that people can gain from Rotaractors as well.
Yes, that's something that's often overlooked, but people don't leave their professional lives at the door when they come to Rotary or Rotaract. Okay, now looking at your initiative in starting the Rotarian Rotaractor Hub, what do you want to gain from that?
For me, it's the ongoing dialogue piece. So it's providing people, when they have these questions around, whether it's looking for a particular resource, like how to start a Rotaract club, or if they've genuinely got a question around a change that they might be implementing, and having an environment that they can test that theory on in advance. So perhaps it might be a club that is looking to move their meetings from a lunchtime to, we'll say, a breakfast slot, and then testing with the collaboration hub to say, we're looking at changing our meeting times to breakfast to suit millennials in particular. Is this something that would resonate? Now, what you'll generally find is that millennials tend to want evening meetings rather than breakfast meetings. So then at least they could get the feedback in advance that, actually evenings would work better. And then it helps proactively manage some of those changes and, like I said, get feedback in real time. But I think the ultimate thing, Caro, is just encouraging a culture where both groups work together and in partnership, rather than continuing to work in silos. So admittedly, I was a little bit surprised when we looked at the collaboration, when we investigated the collaboration hub, and there weren't any other groups like this on Facebook. In my ideal world, I'd love to see not only a collaboration hub for Rotary and Rotaract in Australia and New Zealand, but having these collaboration hubs pop up. So you've got the collaboration hub in the UK, the collaboration hub in Japan, the collaboration hub in Brazil, for example, and start to really bring Rotaract and Rotary together, not just in Australia and New Zealand, but in the world.
Fair enough. Thank you for that. Now, this next question taps into your experience as a RILA participant and no doubt other practical experience in that area. How can RILA be utilised as a channel for recruiting Rotaractors?
It's funny you should ask that, Caro, because as recently as a week and a half ago, we actually held a forum for RILA leaders across the country in Melbourne. So we brought together it wasn't a Rotaract driven initiative. This was driven as part of my RILA passion. Myself and Benjamin McNevin, who's also a previous RILA director, we worked to bring as many of the RILA directors as possible to Melbourne to discuss strengths, challenges, and areas of opportunity, and just share our programs. And in areas of opportunity, Rotaract was a really big thing that came up, and Rotary as well. So Rotaract not only being the only avenue, but, can we start Rotary clubs? And one of the keys that we're looking to explore is developing online e-clubs to really engage the alumni from different RILA programs. Because often what happens is, while we often have Facebook groups for each RILA cohort, it's really segmented to that district and that year. So there's a lot of cross-pollination that's being missed. So that's to highlight that there's a few kind of broader, big picture initiatives that are in the pipeline at the moment, which is quite exciting. At a local level, what I've seen to be most successful is where a group of Rilarians either is influenced by an existing Rotaractor or perhaps an engaging Rotaract speaker, and it needs to be done in an appropriate way, to understand what Rotaract is and actually spur a Rotaract club out of that RILA cohort. So that's where they've got friendships that are already in existence. They've got a desire to maintain the RILA connection. I think the bit that gets missed is twofold. One is providing the support as to really what Rotary is, and that's not specific to RILA, that's more broadly. I think Rotary is doing a lot of things, and sometimes that's hard to articulate and dissect. And the second element is trying to understand what the long-term goals of that club are. So are they looking to really create a difference as a cohort, and they'll do that almost until all of them age out, or perhaps we can transition them to a Rotary club? Or are they really looking to build a club where they bring in new members from the outside as well? Because I'd say that that's a challenge that people experience, is that if new members come into a RILA-initiated club, sometimes they feel like they're on the outer because the core team has come from RILA. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So it's a matter of the RILA team, if you like, that core group, ensuring that they're inclusive and that they do things that ensure that the newbies can feel part of the team.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that's where it comes down to, well, what's your actual focus area as a club? So can you pick a cause that you're passionate about and really remember that, you know, the cause is the underlying mission rather than just sustaining RILA? And I think that's sometimes where the disconnect is.
Yes, it's easy enough done, because when you have something that's big and so successful as that, it's easy to lose sight of other things in the context of life. One more question, I think. Yeah, one more question, and I think this is a really good one for you as a successful young professional and with a stellar career in Rotaract. For you, what are the essential elements of a successful mentoring program?
I think the biggest, there's two things that I would flag. One is a really clear framework of what that mentor program looks like. So understanding essentially a start and an end time, or at least a review time, so that at that point you can decide whether that mentorship relationship has run its course or whether you'll extend that relationship. And within that framework, having a really clear purpose as well. So having clear goals and expectations at the start, understanding how often you'll catch up and what the method of communication will be between catch-ups. So perhaps it's face-to-face once a month, but contact via email or Facebook in the interim. And then the second element is the art of finding the right people to match with each other. So whether it's running some sort of organic or, speed networking type night where people can actually share what their goals are and try and find someone that they click with, rather than arrange type mentoring where there's a perspective of, well, you two, this Rotaractor and this Rotarian are in the same industry, so we should match them. Because these days a lot of skills are actually cross-transferable. So unless there's very niche, specific questions for a particular profession, which can probably be answered outside the context of the mentorship, it really is about skill development, being able to have open, honest, transparent communication, and feeling a sense of trust with the mentor that you've got as well. So the two things were a clear framework and I guess the right energy in and match in the relationship.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Well, that brings us to the, let me just check to make sure that I haven't missed any. No more questions. It's fantastic, Beck. But just before we go, I would like to give a plug to a webinar that we have coming up next Thursday, which is a little bit special, and I suppose it has a similar theme to tonight in that it is another of our very senior leaders, this time in Rotary, where we have our Rotary International Director, Noel Travaskis, speaking on telling your Rotary story. And as Noel has recently been encouraging people to consider the future of Rotary in Australia and New Zealand, I think this is going to be a very, very timely opportunity to hear from Noel and, more importantly, to join a really important conversation. So that should be a really good one. But before we go, focusing back on tonight, a huge thank you to Beck for what I think has been an absolutely wonderful presentation.
Thanks, Sarah.
And thank you to all in our audience for being there too. It's been, thank you again, Beck. Good night, everyone.